Today, I wanted to take a deep dive into the book Mickey 7 and the movie Mickey 17. We'll begin with a spoiler-free summary of the book Mickey 7. Following this, we'll explore the book in detail, having some discussion. Lastly, after watching the movie adaptation, Mickey 17, I will discuss the film independently while also comparing and contrasting it with the book. Having only read the book prior to watching Mickey 17, this should be interesting, so let's get into it. So the spoiler-free review is Mickey 7 takes place in the far future. Humanity has left Earth and is colonizing the stars. The book centers on Mickey, Mickey 7 specifically. He's an average nobody who volunteers to be an expendable. What's an expendable? Well, an expendable is someone who is used for dangerous tasks with the understanding that they will probably be unalived, and when they do, they'll be cloned. This is essential, at least humanity has deemed it essential, for their interstellar colonization efforts. However, having two expendables simultaneously is strictly forbidden due to past catastrophic events. Mickey 7 is the seventh version of himself, having perished 6 times previously. He and other colonists are trying to settle the new planet Niflheim. The book opens with everyone, including Mickey himself, assuming he's about to be and reach an untimely demise again. Mickey 8 is created as a result, but Mickey 7 survives, returns to his room, and encounters his clone, Mickey 8. The book is a fast-paced, engaging blend of dark humor and sci-fi that explores themes of immortality, consciousness, and sentience. It works both as an entertaining and thought-provoking exploration of deeper philosophical questions, or if you just enjoy sci-fi and engaging reads, Mickey 7 is a good choice. I am interested to see how director Bong Joon-ho adapts this for his film, Mickey 17. But before I watch Robert Pattinson bite the dust multiple times, I want to discuss the book in more detail. So be warned, from here on out, spoilers are everywhere. Okay, so here's a high-level refresher of the book. Mickey 7 is an expendable on a human colonization mission on the dangerous ice world Niflheim. If he dies, a new clone with his memories is created. He is a former historian who took the job to escape debt. On a scouting mission, Mickey 7 falls into a crevasse, is left for dead by his partner, Berto. The colony creates Mickey 8, a new iteration of Mickey. Mickey 7 survives, aided by a native alien. The colonists call this native alien a creeper, and he returns to the colony base, finding Mickey 8 already active in his room. Remember, the existence of multiples is forbidden, and it is punishable by death for either one or both. Doesn't matter, it's just a bad thing. Mickey 7 and Mickey 8 decide to coexist in secret, sharing one identity, meager food rations, a 1,000-calorie limit each due to a colony-wide limit, and trying to deceive Mickey's girlfriend Nasha, his best friend Berto, and the suspicious colony leader Commander Marshall. Life on Niflheim worsens with food shortages and other failures. The native creepers, the native aliens, they become more active, and they're perceived as a growing threat by the colonists, especially by Commander Marshall, who is a devout natalist, which a natalist is a religious group that despises expendables. Commander Marshall becomes aware that something is amiss with Mickey and decides to send both Mickey 7 and Mickey 8 on a suicide mission to bomb the creepers. Mickey 8 dies on this mission. Mickey 7 negotiates with the creeper that saved him at the beginning of the book. He leaves Mickey 8's bomb with the creepers to deter Commander Marshall from attacking. Mickey 7 returns to the colony, informs Commander Marshall of these events, and it forces Commander Marshall to maintain a fragile peace and not kill his only diplomat, Mickey 7, to the creepers. Mickey 7 quits his role as an expendable, reclaiming some agency. Nasha stays with Mickey. Mickey reveals to her that he never left Mickey 8's bomb with creepers, but stashed it under some rocks and actually bluffed Marshall. The story closes on a satisfying, semi-hopeful note, but definitely leaves room for a sequel. So what's the immediate vibe after finishing Mickey 7? It wasn't one of those books that completely reshapes your worldview or is life-changing. It didn't need to be, because I genuinely enjoyed it. This is so well paced that I flew through it in maybe 2 or 3 days. I was hoping for a slightly deeper emotional punch, but the engagement factor was just definitely high as like a reader. What really got me thinking from the get-go is the whole expendable concept. Edward Ashton, the author, uses this fantastic dark and situational humor to introduce it. But once you peel that layer back, you're hit with some serious philosophical questions, right? Which is kind of where sci-fi shines. What does it actually mean to be you? Are we unique? Are our experiences just data that can be more or less copied? It makes you consider the very nature of individuality, and this brings me to a core question the book poses. Are all these Mickey or Mickeys the same person? I don't think so, and the book does seem to guide you there. Mickey 7 and Mickey 8, they're incredibly similar, sure, but not identical. It's kind of like identical twins, if you happen to know any identical twins in your life. As kids, as children, they might seem the same, they're hard to tell apart. But with time and unique experiences, they do diverge, and it's easier to tell them apart as adults. I feel each Mickey, with every new moment he lives, becomes more distinct from other Mickeys. One of the most powerful scenes for me illustrating this odd, tragic individuality was when Mickey 7 plays rock, paper, scissors against Mickey 8. And Mickey 8 actually spares Mickey 7, even though he lost rock, paper, scissors, right? Like they were going to play rock, paper, scissors, and whoever lost was going to get basically reabsorbed. The moment showed an understanding of their shared yet separate situation. It really highlighted that even as clones, they feel like distinct beings. You had one at the mercy of the other. And in regards to empathy, you have Mickey 8 feeling empathy for Mickey 7. And kind of like the definition of empathy is you are relating to another individual. You're understanding their sorrow to another individual. And the reason why empathy is sometimes difficult is because it is another person. It is another individual. It is a separate experience. So that moment really does cement that these are two separate people. This idea of self is it's also complicated even further by the memory upload process, right? Like there's like the helmet, they put it on Mickey, and then he re-uploads all of his memories. Mickey knows that it's not perfect. There's always going to be little gaps, lost moments between when he last put it on and when he died. It immediately creates a kind of fracture in his sense of continuous identity. And it made me realize how much this would disrupt your sense of trust, not just in others, but also kind of in your own past. You make assumptions based off what others have told you. And if you can't be sure it's all there, or someone has manipulated those gaps, or you suspect that becomes an issue. And in Mickey's case, Berto, his best friend, does manipulate those gaps. He's never 100% honest with Mickey, and gradually Mickey develops a distrust for him. Regarding Mickey himself as like just a character, kind of examining him as a character, I see him as maybe just a bit below average, at least at the start. And if I'm being really honest, I kind of feel his whole predicament in becoming an expendable in the first place was his own doing. He's the one who got into gambling debt. He's the one who made some really poor decisions. All of them were self-inflicted. But what's really undeniable is his evolution. And this is where I think Edward Ashton, the author, stands out. And I hope in Mickey 17 they show this. The stakes get impossibly high as death becomes almost a certainty without the promise of him becoming another copy. As a result of this, he develops this surprising bravery. Maybe it's because of a numbness to death. And on a personal level, I really related to that core struggle of his, that feeling of asking, what does society value in me? How can I make myself more valuable? That's a very real human question. I think we all, like him, really want to continue to embrace who we are in the present and the most positive version of what we could be in the future, rather than being defined by what society thinks we should be. And I think that's actually the most relatable part of Mickey 7. So if I were in Mickey's shoes facing regeneration, would I be reckless? I don't think so. I'd still do everything in my power to preserve my current life. I think the survival instinct is too strong, and Mickey 7 actually talks about this to Kat, I believe it is, when they're going out on, not an excursion, but they're out scouting or doing something out in the field. And Kat's like, oh, you don't got to worry about it, you'll just die. And he's just basically like, well, I don't want to. Right, I don't think anybody wants to. The will to survive is really strong, and I think we would all react similar to how Mickey does, regardless if we're a clone or the original. When Mickey 7 returns to find Mickey 8 activated, I didn't really root for one over the other. They both felt like distinct individuals thrown into this kind of nightmare. It is a psychological mind bender for them both, and I mostly just felt for their shared and impossible situation, because right from the outset, they both know that one of them is going to have to go, right? Regardless of what could feasibly happen, multiples are not allowed. And like I mentioned, there's that survival instinct, so they both don't want to be the one that goes, and they both don't want to be the one that makes the decision for the other one to make them go. Of course, Mickey isn't alone in this. His relationship with Nasha is a key emotional anchor for him, a big part of what he's fighting for. And then there's Berto. Mickey clearly values loyalty so much, and I think his view of Berto gets more complicated as things go on. Perhaps a sense of disillusionment. Berto himself felt like he had potential to be even more fleshed out as a character, and I thought sometimes he just came across as too competent. He's kind of like the perfect guy, and Mickey resents him for that, and Mickey kind of thinks that I resent Berto because he's so good at everything he attempts, but really, Berto's just kind of a jerk to Mickey. He doesn't value his friendship or relationship with Mickey. And the lines do blur a little bit because Mickey's in Expendable, so I get how it can be a little ambiguous on Berto's reception of it all. So Mickey calls out Berto near the end of the book and basically says, "You're afraid, that's why you do what you do." And that's kind of it. And I felt like, one, it needed more built up, and two, it didn't feel like a good payoff. That moment didn't really land for me. And you can't talk about the colony without talking about Commander Marshall. Sure, he's the antagonist, but I didn't really see him as just purely a villain. His actions, when you consider the immense pressure and fear on Niflheim that everyone is under, his decisions do become understandable. I think so. He does seem to keep a relatively level head. He seems to be competent. He even makes pragmatic choices, like continuing to use Mickey despite his own personal dislike for Expendables, because he knows the colony needs a role like Mickey. And I think him being able to set aside his religious views as a natalist and do that tells me that he's more pragmatic than I think a first impression gives. As a character, he's not necessarily the bad guy. He's certainly the antagonist to Mickey. I wouldn't paint him as just like the straight villain of the story. He's more complex than that. Even in minor characters like Kat add interesting layers. Her fear driving her to want to become an expendable offers such a dark contrast to Mickey's experience and really underscores the desperation of their whole situation. The central conflict to Mickey's One Must Go is just a near perfect setup. It's easy to grasp, instantly creates tension, and drives the whole narrative so effectively. The pacing of the novel, as I mentioned, is just excellent. It never felt like it dragged. It's not really a book that relies on massive plot twists, though the reveal about the native creepers being sentient hive mind was not a huge shock for me. I kind of forecasted that from the get-go, but he also introduces the creepers like literally page 10. So I kind of suspected something along those lines, and he wasn't trying to do like a twist or gotcha. The book feels more like a fun, dark comedy with a strong sci-fi flavor. Mickey 7 is definitely making some larger thematic points, right? You know, themes like exploitation, manifest destiny, raw survival. Those things stand out, right? The whole Niflheim mission with its almost blind optimism toward past colonial failures feels like a sharp critique of a corporate colonial mindset, especially the tendency to destroy what isn't immediately understood. We gotta talk about the sci-fi tech. The regeneration tank, memory uploads, recycler, all that stuff is perfectly integrated. It's great because these aren't just cool gadgets, right? They're fundamental to Mickey's story, his identity, and of course the ethical questions that the book raises. They complete the full circle of this sci-fi world that Edward Ashton made. The world building of Niflheim felt very surface level. It was an ice planet, there's aliens, but he also didn't have a reason plot-wise to dive into any real vivid detail about what the world is and everything. So there's like the ice planet, there's like the colony and tunnels. That's all you really get in this world, and the creepers. There is a sequel, so I imagine the planet gets more explored there, and I'd be curious to know about that. So let me know down in the comments if you'd like for me to read that and kind of give you my 2 cents. The ethics of the Expendable program, that's a tough circle to square, but I'm going to try. I could see a very niche utilitarian argument like preserving essential specialists. But the way it's implemented in the book, Mickey 7, feels a little inefficient, and it highlights a system that devalues certain lives, and maybe that's the point. But what I'm kind of getting at is, if you have this technology to clone people, I can understand having an expendable like Mickey available. That way he's on command, he's ready for emergency situations, and you can sacrifice him without thinking about it. Why would you not use this technology to clone your specialists as needed, right? I understand the whole multiples thing and the backstory with that. I get it and why they don't do that. But why would you not mandate that all of your specialists, your hard to replace specialists, your techs, your biologists, your physicists, all that stuff, right? Certain engineers, why would you not have them back up their memories every single week, let's say? That way, if something does happen to them, you're not out of specialists when you're, however many light years away from the nearest viable planet. It doesn't make much sense. It seemed like kind of a big hole for me in terms of like the universe and logic of this world. But again, there is a sequel. I don't want to say that a sequel solves everything, but maybe there's a reason why they don't do that. I guess maybe humanity is just that scared of this technology, so they limit it that severely is the only real justification I can come up with. But again, it feels like a big hole. You could just copy your specialists when needed. What does the future hold for Mickey and Nasha and that colony? I think they'll all move forward trying to build a life, but survival will still be a daily struggle. I do think, since there is a sequel, obviously there's going to be some past deceptions from Mickey, some other things that come to light. For instance, the whole not leaving the bomb with the creepers, but leaving it basically under some rocks. That's going to come back to haunt him probably in the sequel. I also think the colony's probably not done with cloning. Now that they've seen multiples and they've experienced it, maybe it doesn't seem as scary. So maybe Mickey's not the only clone anymore. That could happen. Overall, the ending to the book doesn't feel like a neat, tidy, happily ever after. It's satisfying, sure, and honestly, we could stop here. You could stop here on this book, and you'd be fine. You don't necessarily feel a need to have a sequel. So, what this novel really left me thinking about is our own world. It's a powerful reminder, in regards to the expendable technology, that technology itself isn't inherently good or bad, but it's almost always co-opted or abused in the pursuit of power and influence. Technological advancement doesn't automatically mean moral advancement. So, anyway, overall, good book. I recommend it. Heading towards the movie Mickey 17, what am I hoping for? I really, really hope that they nail the dark situational humor. I think that's kind of crucial to the book's DNA. I also hope they don't shy away from those big philosophical thematic discussions that we dove into here in our deep dive that the book clearly gets into. It would also be great if they included the backstory of the guy who cloned himself. I forget his name. If you read the book, you know who I'm talking about. He was like that mad scientist who was like wealthy. He basically went to another planet, cloned himself, developed the technology, and the union, the government, humanity had to basically blow up the planet. Because that really does cement why multiples are so forbidden, and it does raise the stakes for Mickey. So my main nervousness is that the movie is going to become action-oriented, and it's going to lose some of the philosophical depth that the book had. I do understand that film is a visual medium, and some changes are inevitable, so I am going to judge this on its own merits when we come back. So through the power of editing, I'm going to come right back after I watch this. Maybe I'll have popcorn. And we're back. So I finished watching it. It's a day later, but I did get there. So fresh thoughts, Mickey 17. Looking at it purely as a film. On its own merits, honestly, it's good. I definitely enjoyed watching it, and I can see myself occasionally finding it on a streaming service and rewatching it. But did it leave a lasting, you absolutely have to see this kind of impression? Not quite. The core premise, which of course comes from Edward Ashton's book, Mickey 7, is still fantastic, translates well to the film itself. But beyond that, nothing really jumped out as extraordinary. It's not a bad film, okay, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't one of those movies you can't wait to talk about with other people and convince them to rush out and see. So let's break it down. First, the good parts. I genuinely enjoyed, I think, the situational humor and the overall darkness of the story. Those were absolutely nailed. There are moments and scenes where not a single word is said, and it's just inherently funny or grimly amusing, purely based on the context. Bong Joon-ho's team understood the assignment in that aspect. His montage work was excellent, and the decision to use Mickey as a narrator was generally well done, guiding us through his bizarre, expendable existence. Performance-wise, Robert Pattinson gives an excellent portrayal of Mickey, and it was clear from the very first interaction between Mickey 17 and Mickey 18 that they are different people. Just from the subtle shifts in Pattinson's vocal tone alone, you could tell this. The movie made a conscious choice to give these two iterations more distinct personalities from the get-go. 17 is a bit softer, as they say. 18 is a little bit harsher from the get-go, and Pattinson was given the difficult job of threading that needle between those two different personality types, keeping them connected but separate, and I think he pulled that off. Nasha was largely unchanged, in my view. She was played expertly by Naomi Ackie, I think her name is. We'll talk a bit more about Nasha in a bit. I want to talk about Mark Ruffalo as Marshall, as Commander Marshall. This was an interesting one. His character, in my opinion, was heavily inspired, let's say, by a certain current political figure. I'm not saying that's good or bad in itself, but it's a very topical choice, and it definitely made Marshall very cartoony as an antagonist. And if that was the direction that Ruffalo received, then mission accomplished, and he absolutely had moments that made me laugh just because of the sheer entitled absurdity of his portrayal. That particular well of inspiration feels a bit overdrawn talking in a broader context. There's many impersonators already that have kind of gone down that rabbit hole, but that's all we'll say. Toni Collette as Gwen was phenomenal. The character was a complete addition. She really leaned into this almost psychotic power trip role as Marshall's wife, and she was captivating. And Naomi Ackie as Nasha, I thought, was very well done. Out of all the characters, her portrayal probably felt the closest to how I pictured her from the book. Pretty true to form. As for Steven Yeun as Berto, love the guy as an actor, but his character here felt kind of meh. He has this breakdown, like this crying breakdown at one point in the movie, and we don't really get a deep understanding why. I assume it's because he's afraid of dying, but there's not a lot of screen time that's dedicated to him, so Yoon never really gets a chance to let this character truly shine, or for us to connect with his motivations. I mean, the name is not even the same. It's Berto in the book, and I forget the name in the movie that they chose. But for me, Pattinson and Collette gave the most effective performances, and Ruffalo is up there as well. Visually, the production design did feel a lot like Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer in certain areas, especially on the ship, which makes sense. Also happens on an icy planet, Snowpiercer does, so there you go. It's an interesting echo. It's not something he's foreign to, right? The world building of Niflheim itself was all right. It effectively conveyed a dangerous ice planet, though perhaps a bit surface level. Not too dissimilar from how I felt about it in the book's depiction in that regard. The cloning process itself remains the coolest sci-fi part, both visually and conceptually. And again, that was an aspect that was probably changed the least by Bong Joon-ho, and a lot of that stems from Edward Ashton. So the narrative overall flowed well enough. I think if I watched just this movie without having the specifics of the book so fresh in my mind, it would have made sense and been somewhat engaging on its own. Because I read the book, I was a little more engaged than I think I otherwise would have been. There are a couple of scenes that really grabbed me visually and thematically, but I wish they were explored more. There's a flashback involving a red button in a car with Mickey as a child, and he feels that he caused his mom's red death by hitting this red button while they were driving. And then there's Mickey 17's dream sequence near the end, and this kind of ties into it, with Marshall's wife, Gwen, and there's this nightmarish reprint of Marshall happening. And in that scene, Mickey touches this red sauce. She calls it sauce. I don't know. The sauce is weird. It's I don't know what it symbolized. But to me, it felt like it was a symbolic callback to that red button because Mickey touches it as though he would touch a button. And I think it signified him overcoming some deep-seated guilt. Those two scenes really had me glued to the screen because they were different from the book wholeheartedly, but they were still very intriguing. Interestingly explored not just what it was like to be an expendable, but the kind of psychological toll this journey has taken on Mickey, or at least gave an understanding of why he is a certain way. It could be powerful stuff, but it felt a bit more like a glimpse than a full exploration. One thing that narratively made no sense to me is the 17 in Mickey 7. Hang with me here. I understand you wanted more deaths for Mickey. A higher number sounds more dramatic. But it felt completely wasted. Most of the deaths we actually see in the film seem to have to do with this vaccine they're developing. I would have loved to have seen more creative and varied ways that Mickey perished to really earn that higher number and underscore the absurdity and horror of his existence. So as a standalone film, it's good. Not great. Would I recommend it to someone who knows nothing about the book? Yeah, I mean, if it's on a streaming service you already pay for, sure, like give it a watch. But I wouldn't go out and purchase a copy. Now, I want to get into the nitty-gritty of how Mickey 17 stacks up to the novel Mickey 7. Overall, I feel like the movie did capture the general tone and DNA of the book, particularly when it came to that dark situational humor. That was a big win. However, it didn't really hit the same notes or achieve the same depth in terms of those philosophical questions that we discussed earlier, about what does it mean to be you? Who are you? So it was like a close but no cigar situation, and for me, it just didn't quite capture the full essence. Like kind of in the ballpark, like in the neighborhood, but missed the street. For instance, Marshall is very different. As I mentioned, he's a full-blown demagogue figure in the movie, complete with supporters in red hats, a failed politician clinging to power. This is a far cry from the more straightforward, no-nonsense, though still flawed, military commander in the book. The addition of his wife, right, it's a whole new character, Gwen, was an interesting choice. Presumably, it was to add complexity to him as an antagonist, and Toni Collette certainly nailed the role. And I think it just gave Ruffalo someone to play with. Then there's Mickey himself. Pattinson's Mickey is honestly pretty close to how I pictured Mickey physically. Scrawny, kind of goofy looking, but personality-wise, the book's Mickey 7 was more pessimistic and more sure of himself. The movie's Mickey 17 starts off much more unsure, softer in his approach to everything. This does provide a good starting point for the contrast of where he ends up by the film's conclusion, learning to balance different aspects of himself, but it's a definite shift from the book's protagonist. The way Mickey 17 and 18 are portrayed as more distinctly different personalities right from the start is also a movie choice, and it was very well done. Very, very well done. I think that was a good call. Nasha, as I said, felt pretty true to form, one of the more direct translations. But Berto underwent a major overhaul. He even has a different name in the movie, which still escapes me, but instead of being that overly competent, almost perfect man from the book, the movie portrays him as a more of like a scrappy hustler, drug dealer type. He's still somewhat like Mickey, but the difference is he's just a bit luckier. Crucially, in the movie, this new Berto's decision play a much larger role in Mickey becoming an expendable in the first place, whereas in the book, it feels like Mickey's own past actions and debts drive him to that point of becoming an expendable. This does change Mickey's initial agency quite a bit. In the book, Mickey is tortured for his debt, and it's painful to the point where he desperately wants to leave no matter what, implying a more conscious choice. In the movie, he's threatened with a painful death. That's plenty of motivation. But he doesn't knowingly enlist to be an expendable, right? Like, he didn't even read the paperwork and seemingly didn't know what he was truly getting into. And contrasting that to the book, where, like, he has chapters where he's having an interview about, are you sure you want to be an expendable? Are you sure you want to be an expendable? Are you sure you want to be an expendable? And the movie doesn't really do that. They're just like, did you read the paperwork? And they just kind of leave it at that. And he's still kind of ignorant until like it's almost too late, I guess. And then there's the final test scene when he first becomes an expendable. In the book, Mickey pulls the trigger, willing to sacrifice his own life with the faith that he'll be reprinted. It's a powerful, active choice. In the movie, the trainer pulls the trigger. For me, that makes his willingness to perish and sacrifice seem less like his own choice, which feels less heroic, though maybe that was a deliberate point the filmmakers were trying to make about his lack of agency and his unsureness. Other changes, Kat plays a much smaller role in the movie compared to the book, almost to the point where you don't even need her in the movie. The colony itself is visually different. It's a big spaceship that seems to have recently landed versus the dome I pictured from the book, which felt more established and struggling in a different way. Even the origin planet was changed from Midgard, which is like a colonized planet that's been like established in the book, to just Earth in the movie. And I think out of all the decisions, that was probably the least impactful to the characters, and it just made it more straightforward for a broader audience, so I understand. And the creepers, they are way different in the movie. They look almost like cute tardigrades, if you know what those are. They're like those little microscopic things. They're designed to promote empathy. They're meant to be kind of cute. While there's an implied hive mind, they're also portrayed as having and carrying about some version of a family unit, making them more relatable again to broader audiences. Again, this all makes sense. I get the justification. In the book, they're just envisioned as like these like truly strange alien, kind of off-putting, something any reasonable person would be scared of. I understand these visual changes, the broader audience thing and all that, but it does change their fundamental nature. The movie also has a much more definitive and final feeling ending, with them literally blowing up the printer or the regenerator, whatever it's called. It's the thing that prints Mickey. Mickey blows it up. There's like a whole ceremony and they blow it up. The negotiation scene with Marshall that provides a different kind of resolution in the book is completely missing, completely rewritten. It's replaced by a more literal explosion. So there's like two explosions that happen near the end. And again, it's kind of what I predicted to happen. Like I was kind of expecting that it would favor big visual moments, as most adaptations do. Again, film's a visual medium, so I get it. Were these deviations better, worse, or just different? For the most part, I think they were not necessarily better or worse, just a different take on an established story. I know that feels like a cop-out, but it's always hard to definitively say which is better in these situations, right? You got the movie, you got the book, but I know it's cliche, but I'm going to say the book, for me, was better. Looking back at my pre-movie hopes and fears, it was a bit disappointing. Bong Joon-ho is a very talented director. He did have a real chance here to explore some fascinating themes from the book more fully, and it felt like he kind of went halfway with many of them, and he really doubled down on this demagoguery aspect that I didn't pick up from the book. Maybe you did. And he did that primarily through this new version of Marshall. I did hope they would address what I still perceive to be a plot hole from the book, which is the man who invented the expendable process and how he was a serial killer. But it still seems silly to me that on such a high-stakes colonizing mission, you wouldn't at least consider backups. Even if I think a way out of this would have been if they said it was really costly to make a backup, right? And maybe it's then Marshall's decision, right? Maybe it's Marshall's decision to say that they're too expensive, and this kind of makes him a cheap leader. It gives a reason in the world as to why you wouldn't do it for everyone. And in my view, I think something like that would be a more satisfying explanation. So, final verdict. Like I said, the book resonated more with me. I think it largely comes down to that first-person perspective of Mickey in the novel. The internal view is so often told best through a book, giving you direct access to thoughts, fears, and in this case, dark humor. However, I know it can be done well in a movie too. It just wasn't. It was done adequately here. It just wasn't like the best. For recommendations, I'd probably recommend the movie to many people, not most people. They would need to be looking for something in the realm of a sci-fi film that has some interesting ideas. But I'd recommend the book to just about every fellow reader, especially those who appreciate an eternal narrative and a deeper dive into some philosophical questions. It's important to note, though, that both the movie and the book are dark comedies at their core, laced with those interesting themes. So I definitely consider if someone is okay with a darker comedic tone before recommending either one. But as always with adaptations, the book is still on your shelf, unchanged, and now there's this interesting cinematic take to consider alongside with it. So that's all I have, guys. If you wouldn't mind showing some love with a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. If you want to join in on some thoughts and comments down below, I would love to have a conversation down there. What'd you think of the book? What'd you think of the movie? Did you prefer one or the other? Let me know your thoughts down there. I'd love to hear them. That is all I have. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.